listeners out there, I realized that I like took a big snort of snot right before we got on the air, and I was not muted. So that's where we're at. It is almost the end of 2021. 2022 is like coming around the corner. I'm here for it. I'm just gonna say, like, this is the year
Sure.
where
I feel some trepidation. Like, I don't want to be overly optimistic.
yeah. So I will say this I will forever remember as the year that I wished people a happy new year for 6 days. So not even a full week. And then we had people up in the Capitol. And so I'm just like I'm ready to turn over a new leaf. So first of all, let me tell you listeners out there who is with me today. I am really lucky. This is a fantastic cast of characters. I have Brian Slattery, who is the arts editor at the New Haven Independent, Markeisha Ricks, who used to be at the New Haven Independent and is now my co-pilot. She is the director of the Youth Arts Journalism Initiative, and I am so lucky that I get to work with her every single day at the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. And Babs Rawls-Ivy, who is a host on WNHH Community Radio. You may know her from Love Babs, Love Talk, and the editor-in-chief of the Inner City News, New Haven's only surviving Black newspaper. So I'm really, yes. And we're just talking about this year in arts. So, and I hope we didn't lose Markeisha. But I want to hop right in and talk about the fact that this was a year. It was the second year of pandemic nonsense, and it felt in a lot of ways like the world was on its head. And yet we had a lot of beauty happen in New Haven. So, Babs, I'm going to hop to you first because we, message each other and often talk at least once a week about beautiful things that are happening in the community. And I want to know, what are some of the things that have helped you stay grounded this year?
I was talking about this on my show with Paul, well, before Paul came on this morning. So my first concert since the pandemic was Brian's group, the Moon Shells, at Cafe 9. That was my first concert during the pandemic. And
it was
everybody
an honor, Babs.
Listen, everybody in that damn Cafe 9 was so happy to be there. Yeah. Like, it was like somebody had just released us from prison. You know what I mean? Like, like we had all just walked out of jail or something. Everybody was people were super nice and super friendly, and we, and it was the beginning of owning that the protocols and the masking and the social distancing, but it just felt so that sort of helped me set the tone moving forward for the rest of the year, that how much I really need community and how much I missed not being with people. Like, I was acutely aware that day how difficult it has been. So that set the tone. And since that time, I took every opportunity to go see stuff. As much as I could be in community, I didn't say no to things. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the theater, I'm gonna go see music, I'm gonna do whatever's available, I'm gonna do. So that really was the tone, set the tone for me and made it much better.
Yeah. Brian, I wanna toss it to you because you're in it. You are someone who is part-time at the Indie, and I still can't wrap my head around that because you write so much that you're like 3 people. And I will say, I want to shout out Karen Ponzio, who is also holding down the art section in the New Haven Independent. But yes, what are some of the things that have kept you grounded this year?
I mean, it's in the arts realm of what's kept me grounded, I think it's been like it has felt like a real privilege to be a part of helping things reopen, both as a reporter and as a musician. There have been a lot of like really meaningful shows, things that feel like they were kind of normal. They would have been normal in 2019 kind of shows. They weren't normal. Like, you could really tell that people were, and and like New Haven and elsewhere. It was, you know, like across New England, I'd say. This was like there was a minute where every show felt like some sort of family reunion. Like people were going because they knew that they would see people that they hadn't seen in like a year and a half, and it was really touching, and like you know, it was very heavy and very like beautiful to see like so many people just being able to reconnect. And I know that makes it all sound like it was overwhelmingly positive, but it kind of was. Like it was, you know, there was a real sense. I got the sense really early on that we were figuring out how to live with this thing. You know, it's like we can't get rid of it now. Like we lost that battle. But you know, there are ways forward, and it's very cool the arts are a place where people have been figuring it out first. You know, because people really want to be able to reconnect, and there are obstacles to overcome, but we're figuring out how to overcome them. And I think that's really, really important. And it has meant a big difference to me when I talk to people who aren't as involved in the arts community. They still don't really know how to do it. And I say, like, look, like we can do this. We just have to do this, 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 and this. And they're like, oh, we can get together. And that's the idea.
Right. And Markeisha, you know, so we're starting with just like some of the arts events that have kept us grounded this year.
Right. I would say one, getting to vicariously live through the work that our students do in Yaji. Like I particularly the part of the year where it's the school year, like getting to read their stories and actually like see things through their eyes was grounding for me. Like, because like Babs mentioned earlier, I wasn't, you know, initially going out. Like I didn't really start going to things again until after I was vaccinated. But like reading the stories of students who also weren't out, they were actually just like talking to artists and trying to understand the things that they were writing about through a screen, just like we are right now. But like one of the stories that comes to mind, one of our Yaji alum, Jewel, wrote about like drag queens, like, you know, trying to get back out and like do their work, and how they pivoted to be able to continue to perform, whether it was through a medium like this, and then getting back to in-person shows. And just like you said, Brian, like the arts, folks in the arts were figuring it out first. They're like, this is how we do this. And because I think people who support the arts want to see like whatever performance be able to continue on, that we're all willing to show up with our vaccine cards or whatever it is that is asked of us, show up with our negative test and not show up sick. Mm. And like that kind of sense that we don't feel is collectively in a wider sense. I feel this sense, at least in the arts, that like we care enough to protect each other, which feels really nice. Right. Like the first thing I think that I got to go to was the Merry Wives performance. Babs and I met our friend Sarah up in New York, and it was opening night in Central Park. And honestly, it was like God smiled on us. The weather was incredible. People were enthusiastic, like, and the show was phenomenal. Like we wanted to stay and see it again. Right. It was like, can you just run it back? Can you just run it back? It was so good. And it just felt like we're back. Not like before, but we're back.
Yeah, there's a we can do this aspect to it now.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is
like euphoric. Like there was something about that night, and,
totally.
And even in the performers, like there's a sense of euphoria that we're back on stage, we're back in front of an audience, and the audience is like, we're back, we're participating, we're here again, right after such a long time away.
And I think it is important to point out that, like, I think that sometimes the arts gets a reputation for being a little bit reckless. Like, you know, it's about like stupid kids showing up at a festival and doing stupid things. And like, that's not what I saw. Like, it's the other way around, that there's just like an awful lot of like care and consideration for everybody around you.
Right. And getting to thank like even the folks who aren't performing, folks who are like the staff, the Absolutely. Theater staff, Absolutely. Like who are ushering people through, checking people's vaccination cards, making Absolutely. Sure that everybody is doing what they agreed to do, and being so kind and gracious about it. Like,
totally.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. I know. like it's nice that it's like that's like that my work is what's keeping it feel better for me and better for I think a lot of people. Like we're I think that we're kind of doing okay in ways that some people aren't yet, you know, because
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's pretty important. Like we can help out, you know.
well, I'd love to get into the specifics of that, Brian, because I think in many ways, yeah, we saw the arts become a template for what other people could be doing. And I know that one of my frustrations, like every year in the history of writing, but especially this year, has been like we have this in the arts, and somehow it isn't translating to other levels of, municipal government, state government. It's
Yeah.
like there's very plain stuff. For instance, I want to shout out Ice the Beef, which did a performance of Romeo and Juliet and pulled in techniques from the theater of the oppressed, which is a technique coined by Augusto Boal, I think in the 80s or 90s. I'm probably wrong about that. But where they performed the play and then interrogated the play and used it as a way to talk about citywide gun violence. And they were both talking to each other and then talking to other youth in the audience and then talking to other adults in the audience. And then I feel like you look at city government and it's like, well, we're about to invest all of this money from American Rescue Plan dollars into 500 cameras so New Haven can just become a surveillance state. And so I would love to know from the three of you, what you're seeing specifically in the arts that could be a template for the city as it's coming back. I think, Brian, you're right. Like we're not going to kick this thing. And I've gotten to the point where I get angry when people say, someday we're going to kick this, because it's with us. But if it's with us, how are we going to move forward in a way that keeps community members safe and also goes to the grassroots on a problem solving approach?
I think because I played in both arenas, right? I was a local legislator, and now I chair the Arts Council, right, and serve on art serving boards. I think artists have always had the freedom to sort of take better care of hearts and minds and community in ways that, the bureaucracy of government can't. So I think what we could learn from artists is that the impossible is absolutely possible, and that there are no walls. If there are walls, we just paint over them or dance over them or sing through them in ways that government can't. And by can't, I mean there's a whole reasons why they can't.
And legitimate reasons too. I mean,
yes, real impediments. I think artists come to community and the world with a sense of deliberate humanity and respect for the creative process, and a don't quit kind of attitude, right? Like I saw it in the days of the height of the AIDS epidemic. It was artists that sort of delivered the meals and raised the money and gathered folks and said we're going to fight this thing. It was artists that did that, right? So any good revolution, any good civil rights journey has its roots in artistic foundation and creativity. The civil rights movement wouldn't be the civil rights movement without music, without artists, without people sort of putting voice to troubled people in ways that you're just not going to get walking into a mayor's office.
Brian, I saw you nodding along. Hop in.
Yeah, I think that the important aspects of it is that I know this isn't true everywhere in the country, but I think that we this is going to sound very starry-eyed, but I think that at the core of it, we have certainly like local. I think our local representatives are people who are eager to reflect their concerns of their constituency, and to the extent that we want the government to do things, I think it's up to us to tell them what we want. And I hope that there's a sense that the arts can help people articulate what it is that they want. Like it's not so much that but not by parroting whatever it is somebody says on the stage, but just that when somebody goes out to a show and they go, I want to be able to do this,
Right.
and I want to be able to do it safely, and just to like have those experiences again and go like, okay, like let's figure out how to do this because we want all this stuff back. And it's not about sort of having some sort of overt political agenda or some list of talking points, as it is about sort of experiencing that we can have some form of civil society back if we want it, and that by figuring out how to do it, we have ways of talking to our local representatives about like how to make this work going forward, that don't feel like sort of ham-handed policies that aren't informed by what people are actually doing. The more we do stuff, the better the policies can be to reflect how we want to keep doing them or do them better. And like that's a pretty important function that's kind of hard to articulate, but can get worked out in the experience of it.
Markeisha, do you want to jump in before we move on?
Sure. I'll just add that, I co-sign what Babs and Brian have both said. And I would just add that, government, like the arts, is best when it is creative. Yes, government has restrictions and cannot freely create without any accountability. But at the end of the day, you don't have to go after the lowest hanging fruit for solutions. You can meet the needs of people and actually have them be a part of the creative process of creating those policies, instead of telling them what you're going to do, asking them what you'd like them to do, to Brian's point. And maybe it's the season that we're in, a time of pandemic where everything on the stove is on fire. And you got a hose, which is great. Like you got a hose and there's lots of water coming out of it. This being money. Okay, how do we get creative in this time? Because the reality is, what most people in government know is somebody's going to turn the spigot off at some point. Somebody's going to wrap up the hose and take it home, and they'll be like, all right, we gave you all of this and you need to spend it in this time frame. But how do we do that creatively in this season? We're a city that has a lot of needs. We had a lot of needs before the pandemic. We're going to have a lot of needs after the pandemic, if there's ever any after the pandemic. But what I always believe, and I've come to believe since I've lived in this city, is that we are a town of very creative people. And we have everything we need to come up with really good solutions, the kinds of solutions that make other communities be like, how'd they do that? We're that city. We're still that city. We're that city every day. But we have to continue, like the arts, to tap into that creativity always.
So I want to touch on something you said, which is like everything is on fire. But first, so Harry Droz, who is the man making the magic happen behind the controls. Harry, can you play one of the 2 voicemails that I sent you? So, and just to cue this up, I will say, I asked folks on social media just to send me messages about what made them pick this year within the arts. And I got 2 messages of I don't know, however many people liked the status on Facebook. And so social media is a lie. And y'all let me down. But thank you for the 2 people who called in.
Can't trust the metaverse.
Greetings, Earthlings. My name is Patricia C. Venner Saavedra, and I am an artist activist. Lucy, you want to know what made me tick culturally this year. So, as an artist, the thing that really made me tick this year was, well, first, surviving, and secondly, making inroads with my art. It's evolving, and because I'm an activist as well as an artist, my work is also saying a lot about the things I feel strongly about, one of which is, what do you call it, the state of the physical world, the ecology, the environment, and the way it's being destroying itself because of humans. And so I have two pieces that were accepted into something called the Global Garden Virtual Art Exhibition. And that really made me excited because that means my voice is getting out there. Thanks a lot for doing this project. Lucy, take care. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Patricia, for calling in. I appreciate you. I hope that you are out there probably fretting about the fact that it is almost 60 degrees today. So Markeisha, that actually feels like a really good segue into something you said, which is the world is on fire. The city's on fire. The world is literally on fire. And, you know, I'm wondering from the three of you, if there was like any theme or anything that emerged that artists were really doing, you know, this year, or did it feel a little bit all over the place?
Well, first of all, the world has always been on fire. It's just that now we just get access to the fire 24/7. You know, I mean, the world has always been on fire. We just
hot right now.
I mean, it's always been on fire. I mean, if you look at any part of history, I'm sure, you know, during the witch crusades, that people were like, "This is the worst possible time ever," right? Like, or during the height of lynching, people were like, "Gosh, this is the worst possible time. Like, there's no other time that has been worse than this time." So the world has always been on fire. What has changed is our access to that information 24 hours a day around the clock. I think the one thing for me that spoke to me about what the singular, the overarching theme for me, for artists, was that we are going to create art. We're going to live out our art in the midst of whatever this is, whatever this is, because the this is changes. I mean, once upon a time it was HIV and AIDS. Now it's this pandemic that has taken artists from us and creatives from us. And everybody has been brought acutely aware of how fragile we all are in these moments. And that we're all, I don't want to say borrowed time, but we have and we don't have infinite amounts of time to do all the things. And artists, I think, more than anybody on the planet, more than doctors, I think, more than the medical profession, understand that you create art right now. Like there's no putting off creating art until tomorrow. That you create the art that calls to you, that you long for right now. Like there's no putting off. I never hear artists say, "Well, I don't have a paintbrush, so therefore I can't paint," or "I don't have access to a computer, so therefore I can't write the great American novel." Hell no. You know what they do? They're like, "Well, if I can't type it, I'll write it." You know what I mean? And I'll write it on cardboard if I have to. It's that kind of purposeful, intentional creativity that I just find stunning. You know, like there are no barriers. And if there are, this is how we're going to get around them, over them, through them, whatever.
Yeah, I've noticed a similar thing. I think that when I talk to, sorry, I'm hesitating because it's hard for me to talk about this stuff without swearing. So I have to
Me
talk.
too, Brian.
I have to talk slower than usual.
I know. I'm sorry that the FCC is out there.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
cramping your style.
Yeah. So, but when I this year has been a time where I've managed to reconnect with a lot of artists, both here and elsewhere, and the narrative that keeps coming up for all of us is that it's been probably the most clarifying couple of years we've experienced in our lives. There's just been a real sense of what is important and what is not. And I think that that's getting reflected in the kind of art that's gotten made in the last few years, even before the pandemic really started, but especially during it. I think people are communicating their messages more directly than they might have otherwise. They're communicating them with a sense of hoping to reach an audience that doesn't necessarily have the time to figure out like a artistic puzzle. Like they just need to like get a message, whatever that. And so you think very hard about how to deliver that message very clearly and succinctly. And I feel like for that reason I've seen and heard a lot of really good stuff. You know, because people have turned their editors on to a pretty large degree and are going like, we have some things to say because, you know, we might not, or we have, or even more importantly, like we have some questions we're trying to ask. And we got to ask them because we might not get another shot at this. You know, we don't know what the, you know, we don't know if we're going to be able to keep doing live shows. We don't know if like what the stuff that we've gotten back, if we're going to have to adapt again and again and again. So, you know, when you're in front of an audience, you say what you want to say and you ask what you want to ask and you make sure that that gets across in the, you know, in the time that you have. And so I think some of the shows have been pretty intense for that reason, but also like very meaningful. It's been kind of great.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I, again, couldn't co-sign any of this anymore. But I think to specifically a point about uncertainty and loss, you know, I think about the numbers, like the sheer numbers of people who've died, of course, because of COVID-19. I think we reached 800,000 here in the United States. And that's just here. Like we haven't even touched on the fact that like the global deaths as well as like global artistic expression, right? Like we haven't touched, like we've been talking from a real westernized point of view, in fact. But like just thinking about loss and the idea of urgency that you and really like I think about the artist Virgil, I think it's Abloh, who was the creative director for Louis Vuitton. African-American man, 42 years old. He died at 42. He lived those 42 years up until this year with so much urgency for what he not only wanted to create, but what he wanted to do for other creatives, right? Like he was opening doors for other people to come behind. And he held that door like he was like, it was like Game of Thrones. Like he held the door so that people could get in. Because he's like, you know, if I'm not standing in the door, maybe these other folks can't get in. Right. So like I feel like people are creating with a sense of urgency that because the line between life and death is so small right now, that veil is super thin. And nobody knows because of this kind of uncertainty that we all live with right now. Nobody knows if that thing that I've been putting off creating never gets made because I didn't do it. So people are creating with a sense of urgency and a sense of clarity, like Brian said, that like, if this is the last thing I create, then I need to go for it, regardless of what happens to it, regardless of who sees it.
And getting back to Babs's point, though, that the world has always been on fire, like, I think that, you know, there is also that sense that, like, I think artists are in a particularly, were and remain in a good position to keep doing what they do, because it's like, oh, do we have a lot of trouble finding a place to do our thing, and do we have no money, and do we have this, that's the life.
That's the life. I was just listening to something on NPR earlier today about a group of Afghan refugee musicians who were able to escape Afghanistan and get to Portugal, where they're going to get asylum. But they were talking about, and, you know, to the point of the world being on fire, they remember when the Taliban came the first time,
totally,
and completely banned music. They couldn't even do their work. So that's like its own loss and death right there for them in their community, right? And so they know what it is to live in a place where they're like their literal means of creative expression. And I'm sure they figured out how to create in silence without anyone looking, but like those years, and they know what it's like to be able to do so fully and freely, but they live with that like constant fear that it's going to be taken away, right? And I think about like here in the United States, we have, you know, groups of people who want to ban certain kinds of books. So like if you have a book and you like this book has to get out, but you live in a place where it could at any moment be something that is like off the table for you to do, like it's just amazing to me. Like it's yeah.
And you know, and to all those points, artists have always lived under that threat.
Right.
Always. And since the beginning of time. I mean, even artists that rocked with Christ. I mean, artists have always lived with the threat of understanding acutely that we got to get this done now. Like art is of right now. It is not for, we'll get round to it next week. And artists will tell you, I have to do this thing. Like whatever your art is, you are called so strongly to it that nothing keeps you from it. And the sense of urgency is very, very real. Very, very real. And honestly, that's probably how we all should sort of take life. Not with this cavalier attitude that we will always have more time, because this pandemic has clearly shown us, but not just this pandemic, life in general has shown us.
Yeah, the pandemic just makes it more acute.
Just makes it more acute and just brings it right to your, you know, it brings it to your front door. But
much more obvious.
We have all lost loved ones at some point in our lives prior to the pandemic, you know, for no other reason other than it was their time to exit the stage. So we're no strangers to loss, you know. And I'm always struck by how surprised we are when people die. You know, like none of us are going to live forever. But I do think that artists sort of understand that better than most.
Right. But it's also a reminder too, when artists die, of course, we just lost Bell Hooks. And, you know, in fact, she does live on forever because of her work and what it's
right
to the world. But at the same time, knowing that her spirit is no longer in this realm, it feels like a loss in the family.
It does. And you know, thinking about also like life expectancy. So I understand that 69 is not the same as 42 or 20 something, but 69 still feels young. That still feels, you know, and maybe that's because like that's my parents' age. It still feels like there is a lot of living that
because we got Betty White running around at 100.
That's right.
Van Dyke is 97. Like I think, right. Yeah, like he's like 97 or 98.
And so thinking, you know, also thinking about how much she gave and what a gift that is to us, but also the ways in which the world inevitably like ground her down and probably tore her down during her life. And of course we know that because we have a written record of it in part. So I also want to ask for this about this. I have felt in my work this tension between some artists who are really providing healing or trying to provide healing, and then the great need for healing and also like stopping and grieving and taking stock of things, and people not being able to, and just moving forward and moving forward and moving forward in this constant grind. And I'm wondering if you have felt that tension, or sort of either side of it. You know, have the arts healed you this year, or helped you heal this year?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm of the mindset that art always does something, right? Like whether it heals you or angers you or gives you pause, it does something. It does change you, but the other side for me is creating community. Creating community is its own artistry too. And I think that's what I took great healing in, is that creating a community where I can just be myself and enjoy other artistic things with the community of my choosing, is what we are called to do as humans, right? To be in communion with each other, to share. As I said to Paul this morning, it's not sorrow or celebration. It is sorrow and celebration. It is loss and birth. I mean, it is all these things at the same time. So we don't choose sorrow. We choose celebration, but there can be no celebration without walking past through sorrow. I mean, it just isn't.
I will say I agree, and partly we're in a sorrow because some folks aren't out there getting vaccinated. Like, I just need to name that.
Yes.
So I think some of the sorrow that we have experienced this year also feels like it was and is preventable. And I know for me as a reporter and like as a human, that's hard. That's hard. I
think I'm with you too, Lucy.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to sort of, when I hear people talk about why they don't want to get vaccinated, and I'm like, but this is how you save the world. Like we all have something that we could do to save the world. This is our part. And why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.
And I think for me is where I land at is that before I can get to sorrow, there's a deep seat of anger, because there is a sense, at least for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but getting vaccinated, right? Like everybody isn't an activist, everybody isn't an artist, but like everybody can't like give money, everybody can't even give blood. But I was like, pretty much everybody can get vaccinated. That's literally something you could do for your fellow human, right? And I don't like humans like that. Like, I'm just not a fan sometimes. Like, y'all know me. But I was like, surely, the way we are, I've lived in places that are prone to hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, you name it. And even here in the Northeast, I've seen people help shovel out. Like, I've seen people do the things that help me believe, okay, maybe I got to give humanity less than a side eye. Maybe we're all right. But I've been far more disappointed during this time. And I think I remember sitting in the symphony when we went, I think their opening night at the Schubert this year. And I love, because they were playing pieces written by or composed by Black composers and Black women particularly. Am I right, Babs?
Yes.
Okay. And there was something, because some of those were from early on, but there's something about them that had not only urgency, but the anger I felt. Like some of those things really captured the jarring sense of working towards something, being for and in support of something, and the jarring sense of other people being diametrically opposed to those things. And you're like, but how can you be diametrically opposed to being alive? Like, why are you against that? Because like, even if you don't like me, like the chances of me dying and you dying are kind of the same. Like, yeah.
And I will say shout out to arts institutions. So this comes back to something Brian said very early in the conversation. Early on, so the vaccine comes along in April. It's also wild thinking of this year, because in some ways it has felt like 30 seconds, and in some ways it has felt like 5 years to
me.
And
I say this before you go on. I feel like we're going to start identifying time differently, as opposed to, how January is the beginning of the year.
I think that's true.
Like, I feel like the pandemic is the beginning of the year, and like when we identify the pandemic, when we got vaccinated, like those are like key points in time now, which makes it hard for me to think of January and December as the beginning and end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And Markeisha, you mentioned our students. So they think about March 12th as the day, March 12th, 2020 was the day that everything changed. Brian and I got to share a high school auditorium because Wilbercross actors were putting on a play that now feels crazy irresponsible, but there was so much that we didn't know. But Brian, returning to something that you said much earlier in the conversation, I think when vaccines were rolling out, a lot of people said, no, 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 we can't do mandates. Theaters and performing arts venues, not in every state, but in our state and in our city, were some of the first to enforce vax mandates. And at the time, there was this whole, oh, this is never going to work. This isn't going to be okay. And I will say, people shut up and got vaccinated for the most part. You know, occasionally I've talked to someone who works at a box office and will say, I've had a negative experience with a caller where they really don't understand why they need to be vaccinated to see a performance. But I think what we've seen is that once you put this into play, and I will shout out Keith Mahler, who's at the College Street Music Hall and Westville Music Bowl, because they were some of the first to put a vax. I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, it was vax or test mandate at the time. But since a lot of performers have said, I only want a vax mandate. So there are certain performers who say, I don't care if you have a negative PCR test, that's not enough for me. And, you know, at the time it was a little bit controversial, and I think there were some feathers that were ruffled. And he said, just wait 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, you're going to see a bunch of and sure enough, within 2, maybe 3 weeks, a lot of groups had that. Before we move on, Harry, I'm wondering if you can play the second message, please.
Hi, Lucy. This is Chelsea Peterson, and I just wanted to share an experience I had this summer doing a women's art circle with artist and art therapist Bria Lucky in New Haven. It was a group that met partially virtually and then in monthly workshops at her studio to just do art together with women. And it was just a great thing to share art and process art in a non-judgmental way and in a non-goal-oriented way, and just get together and see other people after the long winter of the pandemic and sort of play in art and in community. So I just wanted to share that and share that I'm grateful for Bria's work and other women artists. All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chelsea. Chelsea has 2 very cute kids, so I'm shouting her out and shouting out her beautiful family. So I do want to ask, before we sort of round the final bend, and I ask you for specifics, because I want to know about specific performances that stayed with you or events that stayed with you. But I have to ask, so David Sepulveda, who is also a dear, dear member of the New Haven Independent family, says, greetings, beautiful people. Given the forecast for a rough winter as regards to the raging COVID variants, and given the resilience that you have been talking about in the arts community, how do you think the uptick will impact the arts and community at large? Who wants to take that one first?
I'll go for it. So one of the interesting things about being a practicing musician is that we've developed a network, like this pretty informal network that touring musicians can use to get around. Like I've been putting up touring musicians as they come through town on a semi-regular basis. Babysat a 1-year-old at one point, super adorbs. But look, like it's like what we've been saying about the resilience part, like that network got set up pretty early and we are taking care of each other, you know, in what is both a very like kind thing and also a very sort of screw you to the rest of the world. Like we're going to keep each other safe kind of thing. And I think that we're more equipped now to deal with the uncertainty of what may come in the pandemic. Like we've now gone through 2 sort of like expansions and contractions of what's possible. And we're better at it than we were at the beginning. And I think that like if venues have to close, if official venues have to close, like we'll artists will pivot. It's like faster than we did before. And like, will it be painful? Sure. Like, of course it will be. Like, it's easier to have like the formal structures in place, but I think that there's been like an informal safety net that got created out of necessity that is still very much intact, and uh, maybe it'll be a permanent feature of the art scene going forward. Like if it's if we're around, if we're doing it for long enough, like maybe I'll be hosting touring musicians for the rest of my life, you know, which wouldn't be a bad thing actually.
I was about to say you look pretty enthused about that.
It's really fun. It's fun for the most part.
Yeah, and I will say, just echoing something Brian and I think also Markeisha that you said earlier in the episode, I do think that there is more care that artists artists have always been empaths. That's not a secret or a spoiler. But I think that people have cared more for each other during and each other physically. You know, I've had many more people say, "Can I hug you? Can I?" You know, and that's nice. That's really, really nice. Or hey, I know we're in a space and we have a lot of room, but can I remove my mask? Are you comfortable with that? And so I want to ask you, we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to ask all of you about, you know, a couple performances that stayed with you or even changed you in some way this year.
I think I'll keep referencing the two that I've already mentioned, which is, like I said, like the performance at Central Park was of the Merry Wives was something about, like, just because it was kind of the first performance for me of like in more than a year. And it was like the physical act, like, because, you know, like taking off your mask once you get home is like the new taking off your bra. So like being able to be in a communal space, like outdoors on a perfect night in Central Park was like, and laughing with, like, I mean, gut wrench, like belly laughs, like people were just yucking it up. We were having such an amazing time. And it was like that. It felt like that. Like people were like cautiously like looking at each other, and, you know, we were all spaced out in this theater, like this theater space. But like, I was like it just made me feel better about people to be in that space, to be with other people sharing laughs, right? Like it didn't feel normal, but it also it felt like a new normal, if you will. And then back to, you know, opening night at the Symphony. And even we had an opportunity to see the Symphony for Christmas. Just being in those spaces together, there's a sing-along part at the Christmas performance. And we're all singing a Christmas song. And I was like, oh my gosh, when was the last time I sang a Christmas song? Like I mean, just generally pre-pandemic even, like, and when I was a reporter at the Tuscaloosa News way back in the dark ages, we actually, one of our arts writers put together a carol, like a sing-along, a Christmas sing-along that I think still goes on to this day. But he put that together, and we would all meet on a Saturday, and people from the community would come and we'd sing Christmas carols and drink hot cocoa. And I was like, I don't think I've done that in like 15, potentially 20 years. Like it's been a long time. And I was like, I will admit, I got a little teary-eyed, quite frankly. I was like, I'm so touched by this. Like, this is so touching. And there were a few little kids in the audience, and it just was too cute. It really was. I was like, oh, this is like, it felt what I remember about people being in community spaces and working together. And I don't know you, you don't know me, but we can share a smile. Like literally what the Christmas song says, that you're waving at people and smiling at people in ways that you don't ordinarily. So yeah, I found all those things where we got to have some moments of levity, some moments of tenderness, very, very touching. And I, you know, really, really appreciate arts and artists and all of the apparatus that supports it for making it so, for staying resilient, working together, taking care of each other so we can at least get back to some of this, right? And I think and back to your original point, I think those of us that support the arts who are not artists Like we'll do what we did, which is continue to slide some money to somebody who needs it. Like, you know, find resources for people. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And the more of us that do that, I think we can change kind of this narrative of the people who aren't willing to do something for someone else, like get a vaccine. Like, let's show people that there are more people who care about each other than don't.
Mm.
That's what I'm looking at the arts to do.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of that. So
Beth, I'm going to toss it to you. Yeah.
I think for me, in the early, when we were just starting to come back and the New Haven Symphony Orchestra started having their concerts at the Boathouse outside, like not inside, but outside. And I thought, wow, this is a great space for that. I don't know why we're not doing concerts on that venue all the time. And I thought that was just amazing to me that I get to enjoy being outside and the symphony at the same time. When do you ever do that? Otherwise, it had the pandemic has given us so many jewels, if we can even think in that way, that we didn't even realize. We never thought about going outside as much as we did. The Long Wharf Theater put on 2 productions in two parts of the city, in 2 different communities, a production outside. I don't think we would have ever done that had it not been for this pandemic. We would have been looking for inside venues to sort of do that, right? Arts and Ideas, the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, made sure that there were things outside so that we could carry on and enjoy arts. So the creativity and the will to create is there. And, you know, not for nothing, I know people got tired of Zoom, but there were some Zoom concerts that I would not have been able to go to for time and money. And I would not have been able to go to every concert. I would have never been able to go to every jazz concert at Dizzy's. I mean, I just would physically, I couldn't do it, but I could log in and catch a concert.
Those are here to stay.
Yes, I mean, I don't care what anybody. I know people are tired of it, but when I could log into St. Louis
a lot of people aren't.
Their symphony, I was just like, this is amazing. And these arts organizations made sure that the quality of the Zoom programming was such that you didn't feel like you was just watching somebody with their camera, with their phone, showing you what they're showing you, that the production value was elevated to the point where, you know what? I can listen to this on the radio, but I'm so glad I could see it from my computer screen. So it was those kinds of things that really sort of like just made me feel like, okay, we can have an arts and experience, not in the way that it used to be, but one that is reimagined, that still allows us to be human and civil and joyous together.
I'm going to throw it to Brian, and I will just say, if you want to know ours over at the Arts Council, just check out our top 10. It'll run at some point next week.
I guess for me, it's been like the long string of firsts really stands out. The latest in that string is that the New Haven Jazz Underground brought back its jam session, which had gone in 3 sheets for a couple of years, and he'd really built up. This is Nick DeMaria had built up a really good scene. And I arrived, and it was the first one, and I was like, do you think anyone's going to come to this? And he's like, we'll see. He wasn't sure. But, like, sure enough, like, a whole bunch of people showed up, and it was one of those moments where I was like, this is New Haven at its best, because the people that he gets to come there, both as participants and as audience members, they are young, they are super diverse, they reflect the city, and we're all there to like support each other. It's like a really beautiful thing. And that's the sort of thing that makes you go like, we can get through this. We can do this, one way or the other. And it's nice to have left so many shows this year with such a sense of hope.
Yes. And to your point, Markeisha, Nick DeMaria's underground jazz is not the same as the Yale undergrad jazz collective.
And Harry has let me know that I need to give a station signal. So you are listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. I used to do that every day. It's still ingrained somewhere in my brain. This is Arts Respond, and we are about wrapping up. Harry has said that he'll let us go for a little bit on Facebook if we want to continue this conversation, which is dangerous because I feel like I could talk to all of you for probably like 3 days. But Brian, I know I did cut you off, and so
no, you didn't. I kept it snappy. I'm good.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much. I love spending time in both physical and virtual space. I will say, Brian, it has been my great joy of this year and of several years to show up to an event and know that you're there. And usually that we are the only people who will keep our masks on for the entire time.
Yes.
So, and I just feel like I saw Babs and Markeisha earlier this week, and I'm really lucky that I get to share a city with all of you. So merry, merry, and happy, happy everything. Have a safe and, I don't know, just soul-filling holiday season. And please don't get COVID.
Well, listen, let me just say this. Okay. Thank you, Lucy, for raising the awareness and the bar on arts that is happening in this city. I always tell people, are you even having an art event if Lucy is not here? Like, is it even an event if she's not here covering it? Because you just, I love this city, but we were sorely lacking in a committed arts collecting of the information. Like we just needed somebody to cover all these things. Because, you know, people would think there was no arts in this community because it's not reflected anywhere. And since you've taken over that arts paper and made it into like a real thing, it has been a joy to sort of feel like my town has a real arts community. And it does. And it's thriving and it's growing. And it's really because of your commitment and elevation of it that has grown it so much. So thank you for your care.
It's a joyful, Brian and I talk about this, and I also want to lift up Brian because I know that sometimes I feel like my body wants to be in multiple places. This Tuesday was one of them, actually.
Oh, and Brian too.
When there was jazz, when there was jazz happening at Cafe 9.
I didn't feel left out, Babs.
But sometimes I will text Brian and just say, hey, are you going to be there? And I feel like my whole body is filled with relief when he says yes, because we can't, one person cannot be at everything. I know KP Karen Ponzio also experiences this. And we are blessed to be in a city where there are too many good things happening. And I want to continue to see too many good things.
Always the problem.
Well, I think
it's a good problem to have, right?
It's the best problem.
My 2022 arts commitment is to text you, Lucy, Brian, and Karen, so that I can make sure I can get to more things. If that's
Let's start a group text.
How is that even possible? I was just about to say, I'm basically feeling underqualified to even be on this conversation because I'm with the three giants of like arts happenings. If I want to know what's going on, all I need to do is look at 1, the arts paper, 2, the New Haven Independent, 3, Babs' Instagram. So
I would say Babs' Instagram is usually for like I usually look at it and then I'm like, oh, and then a word that I can't say because of the FCC. I missed this. Fudge. So thank you all, and I look forward to just sharing space in 2022, but after we take a break. So, and Harry Droz, thank you so much, the magical human who makes WNHH run and did not miss a beat when the pandemic started and has not missed a beat since. Harry, thank you and enjoy the holidays.
All right, I'll see y'all later.
See ya.
Going outside.
You coming to get me?
Yes. Go play in these streets.